Hey everyone, Blake Lovell, Southeastern 14, back here with more thoughts on SEC basketball roster moves, and we're kind of playing catch up with this video. We did some other videos looking back at some things that took place late last week and over the weekend, looking at things like Oscar Tshiebwe declaring for the NBA draft, also Tremont Mark committing or transferring to Arkansas. And so we looked at those in separate videos, so you can find those there. And just for Auburn fans, I'm going to do the Denver Jones transfer edition in a separate video as well. That'll be coming up soon on the channel. But we're going to play catch up on everything else. So that's kind of the everything else video here as we kind of run through some of these moves that took place over the past several days. All right, let's talk about LSU because two of them in particular do involve the Tigers, and one is a nice addition, and that is Jalen Cook going from Tulane to LSU. If you're an SEC basketball fan, you're thinking, wait a second, where have I heard that name, Jalen Cook, not at Tulane? Well, it's because he started his career at LSU. So he returns to Baton Rouge here, and he does it as a much improved and much more experienced player now. Started LSU in the 2020 season. I think he played about 20 games, averaged about 3 points, only played about 8 minutes, but he's coming off a season where he averaged 19.9 points per game at Tulane. That was in the top 30 nationally. Also averaged about 5 assists per game. That's around top 50 nationally. Shot 45.2% from the floor, which will be important to continue the discussion we're going to have here in a second. But you're talking about a guy who, a Walker, Louisiana native. So just as we talked about with Jordan Wright going from Vanderbilt to LSU back home to Baton Rouge. So two Louisiana guys coming in for Matt McMahon, trying to sort of rebuild the foundation of this LSU program. And this is a great 1-2 start here, I think, with Jordan Wright and Jalen Cook, because, again, you've got two guys who have proven they can score at a high level. Cook playing in the AAC. I know it's not the SEC from top to bottom, but that's still a good conference with good opponents. And still, I think you look at it overall, having that experience playing. I mean, look, guys, he's played at least 34 minutes a game the past 2 seasons. So just a ton of experience. Again, shoots the ball pretty well. Shoots 85% from the free throw line, shot about 35% from three. We talked about the assist numbers, almost 2 steals per game too. So kind of a do-it-all guard who I think will be able to step in and really help LSU out right away. And I just think it's another important addition for this team. And, you kind of look at it. I think that, a first-team All-AEC guy. And so, again, that experience just for him kind of growing as a player from the first time he was at LSU. Now he returns for a team that really, what did we say? How many times did we say it last season? Like, it's just, this is a team scoring-wise just could not ever seem to put it together. They could not find enough consistency from the scoring standpoint, and that's why LSU really struggled to that 2-16 record in SEC play. They weren't perfect on the defensive end, but even in games where they played a little bit better defensively, they just could not put enough points together. Well, adding someone like Jalen Cook, I think, fixes those issues. And again, my expectation is that he's going to come in and really provide them with a big scoring boost right away. Now, going to the next part of the conversation on LSU, and that is Adam Miller, who's deciding to transfer from LSU. Now, I talked about kind of the importance of remembering the percentages and those kind of things. Well, I mean, with Adam Miller, look, I mean, the guy was coming off an injury this past season. Pretty much lost him for the year in the 21-22 season. Yeah. So came into this season kind of sort of trying to get back on track. And look, I think the consistency wasn't always there just from, a shooting standpoint. I think he shot about 33.6% from the field, 32% from the 3-point line, which all things considered, you guys know how we always talk about kind of the SEC overall. It's not a great 3-point shooting league. So that's not necessarily a poor percentage in the SEC, but I think just finding more of that consistency was probably something. And again, you don't know what factors in with that injuries, just kind of readjusting to everything after, a season off, essentially. That's not easy to do. And so, so I think it's going to be kind of interesting to see what's next for Adam Miller because, as we did talk about those scoring issues for LSU, it usually came down to, you had KJ Williams, you knew you were getting from him. And we said, if LSU was going to win games, it pretty much had to be the 1-2 combination of KJ Williams and Adam Miller. But you also needed, consistent scoring elsewhere. And it just seemed like that never really happened for the Tigers. And, especially, again, in games where Miller maybe was not scoring at a high level, that made it even tougher because there was so much pressure on KJ Williams. And, again, you weren't getting enough scoring elsewhere. So, he got a little more consistent towards the end of the season. You know, he started to score in double figures somewhat regularly down the stretch, but again, just kind of retrying to find that form again, I think for him from 3-point range will be important because that was a big part of the game. They needed his 3-point shooting last year. And don't get me wrong, he had some big games. And I think he's going to go out and have some big games wherever he decides to transfer. But, you know, I think you also can never kind of discount the fact, too, that I mean, you're talking about guys transferring out from LSU, and remember, I think it's 6 guys have transferred now. Maybe it's 7. I can't remember exactly, but you know, this was a 2-16 team in the SEC. I mean, this was a team that started 12-1, and you know, ultimately, they did not have the finish they wanted to finish at 14-19. That's a hard thing to go through. So, I don't think you can, you know, never really blame players for trying to maybe look elsewhere, see what opportunities are available, especially coming off of what was just a really tough year for everyone to have that kind of season. So, yeah, we'll see what happens with Adam Miller. Obviously, a very talented player, a lot of potential, and hopefully he's able to, again, get back on track, find the right fit because he's certainly can be a dynamic scorer. And yeah, just finding consistency on the offensive side, he will be a valuable asset for someone. And yeah, just it was him along with everyone else was just they were in a tough spot this past season because when you looked at just kind of the way the roster was built, it was always going to be an uphill climb. I think once they got into SEC play, and we just kind of saw that. And you know, again, that kind of put pressure on everyone. Adam Miller, KJ Williams, on everyone, just to sort of try to you know, do a lot, and that's not always easy to do in the SEC, especially against some of the defensive teams you face in this league. So Adam Miller heading elsewhere, and also heading elsewhere, it seems, is Makhel Mitchell from Arkansas, who has added his name to the transfer portal. Now, remember, keep this in mind. I'm doing this on Monday morning, so you never know kind of what continued additions or subtractions there are going to be with rosters. And I know people, the first thing you're going to look at and say, well, what about Makhel Mitchell, right? Because Makhel Mitchell has, you know, announced he's transferring. These two have followed each other everywhere. Is he going to go as well? I do not know as of right now. That could come out on Monday. And so just remember that I'm recording this with the information I have at hand right now. And this is what we know. You know, with Makhel Mitchell, you know, played around 13 minutes per game, played a lot during that stretch in the middle of the season where we talked about kind of Arkansas dealing with a lot of changing rotations because of injuries and all that stuff. Yeah, so by necessity, you had a guy who's 6'10", and he had to play a lot because they needed that in the front court. And you know, I think this one, are you shocked by it? Probably not, because when you look at next season and starting to see kind of what the picture is going to look like, obviously Trevin Brazile makes his return. You know, you guys know how high I am on him. We talked about him a lot, even when he was, you know, injured. We talked about him a lot during the season, the what ifs and all that, because he was clearly becoming one of the most improved players out there nationally, just in terms of the jump that he was about to take. Then had the injury, but you've also got Bay Fall coming in. And when you add all those things together, look, it's opportunity. And so you can't blame guys who maybe were struggling to find that consistent opportunity this season, looking ahead to next season and trying to say, wow, you know, kind of where am I going to fit into the mix, and where is that opportunity going to be? So, yeah, like I said, there's going to be always going to be someone out there that needs a 6'10" guy that can be very physical, like Makhel Mitchell, can use his strength and those kind of things. So I don't have much of a doubt that he'll be able to land somewhere. Obviously, someone who's played at Maryland, Rhode Island, now Arkansas. So he's got some experience. And, you know, as we said, teams that are trying to get older, there will be value there in trying to find the right fit for him and seeing where he lands. Now, like I said, the bigger question becomes with Makhel Mitchell and what is the decision that he makes and those kind of things. Do they transfer together again? Do they not? We'll see. But, yeah, I still think Brazile, Paul, those guys, knowing what you're going to have with them. And I mean, look, it's just a scenario I don't know that you see that both of those guys aren't in the lineup next season in terms of starting. I just think that's where you're headed. So yes, if you look at it from that standpoint, opportunity may have been harder to come by heading into next season, given what it looks like in the front court for Arkansas. So, all right. And another one to quickly run through here. That's Mark Sears from Alabama, declaring for the NBA draft. Yet again, it's been an interesting offseason for Alabama, to say the least. Their, you know, coaching roster has having to reload that from scratch, basically. When you talked about, you know, their top 3 assistants all heading for head coaching jobs, and that's just a product of success. When you have those, that's what happens. And so, yeah, that's what's happened there with Alabama. Now trying to look at the roster itself, and we know they're going to lose guys to the NBA. We've already talked about Brandon Miller, Noah Clowney. Charles Bediako is also declared for the draft. So is John Quinterly. We kind of anticipate some of those guys certainly returning. Some we know are not going to return. But Mark Sears is one that I think, for me, as you look at this process, it's all about, and I think he's pretty much said as such. I'm looking at this article from Jeff Borzello, ESPN, and we'll quote it just as it is. Here's what Sears said. He said, quote, "I want to display my ability to play point guard. I have been playing point guard all of my college career so far, and this year I learned how to play without the ball in my hands. I would like to hear feedback on how NBA teams see me as a potential prospect," end quote there. So that's it, right? That's what everyone, when you're declaring for the draft, you want to get that feedback. You want to see what NBA teams are seeing. And that's exactly what Mark Sears is doing here. So, I think we'll see how this plays out to see, where Alabama goes from here, because it is going to be a team that's going to look a lot different next season. Knowing that, some of these guys are not going to be back. We talked about kind of the coaching changes. Jaden Bradley, we talked about transferring. Amari Burnett transferred to Michigan. So yeah, a lot of changes for this team here. And it'll be interesting to see how Nate Oates continues to kind of, rebuild the roster. But we know there's a lot of talent there. And again, you would expect some of these guys to return out of the NBA draft. And it's just a matter of seeing, who's going to be slotted where and who ultimately makes that return to Tuscaloosa. And we'll see, if Alabama can sort of defend its title next season. As you're looking at it, it's just, it's hard to know right now, because I think the roster, there's still some unknowns with where they are. But, just as everyone else, you fully expect Alabama to rebuild the roster to a standpoint of being an SEC title contender heading into next season. But Mark Sears, another one declaring for the NBA draft here. So there you go. There's some thoughts on some of the movements from last week in SEC basketball roster-wise. And as I said, there'll be more on the way, and we'll continue to have you covered here at Southeastern 14. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button as well. That helps us out. A lot of SEC football and baseball stuff on the channel as well. So check everything out there. As I mentioned earlier, if you're looking for videos on Oscar Tshiebwe, if you're a Kentucky fan, got that one in a separate video on the channel. Video on Tremont Mark to Arkansas, got that one in a video on the channel. Also, I have one coming up with Denver Jones transferring to Auburn as well. So be sure to check all those out on the channel. And again, appreciate your support of Southeastern 14. And thanks as always to our proud sponsor, Bearded Iris, for their support. Check out the link in the description below to everything they've got going on there. And as always, thanks for watching. And we'll talk to you again soon here at Southeastern 14.